Spain, World Cup champions for the second time after beating Argentina 1-0 in extra time in Sunday's final. Spain dominated the pitch but didn't break through until substitute Ferran Torres scored the winner in the 106th game minute. Well, they're now the first team to win the Cup after giving up just one goal the entire tournament. In the coming hours, Andy Burnham set to become the next British Prime Minister. The new Labour Party leader will be the UK's 7th Prime Minister in a decade. Burnham spent 9 years as the mayor of Greater Manchester and has promised the UK, quote, a new era of possibility. For more on all of this, let's bring in Tim Bale. He's a professor of politics at Queen Mary University of London. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning.
So let's get right into it. Do you think that Andy Burnham can break this cycle of his predecessor's political instability?
I think he has to, as far as the Labour Party is concerned. He really is their last chance. I think Labour MPs have looked at the turnover of prime ministers under the previous Conservative government and thought to themselves, we really don't want to go there. They've had to replace Keir Starmer because he is so unpopular and failed to provide a sense of hope, a sense of purpose, a sense of direction. But I think this is the last roll of the dice as far as Labour MPs are concerned. So this really has to work.
What are some of the more urgent issues that he will have to tackle, Tim? I mean, there's certainly the unemployment crisis, the current economy, not to mention further entanglement in conflicts abroad. So how much does he have to do? And I'm sure he's got to do it quick. The list is long.
The list is long, but essentially his in tray, as it were, is the same as Keir Starmer's. He really does need to do something about increasing the rate of growth in the economy, something Keir Starmer promised to do but hasn't really been able to realise. That, I think, is going to depend partly perhaps on making some tax cuts, although that will be difficult given the state of the public finances. So the economy is crucial. The second thing I think he is going to have to do is to ensure that progress which has been made in terms of improving public services, and in particular the National Health Service, is accelerated. There is some change in that sense. We've had waiting lists come down, we've had waiting times in accident and emergency come down, but that needs to go much faster. And then thirdly, and we shouldn't forget about this, even if it's something that perhaps Labour supporters are less concerned about, he has to show that he's getting a grip on the small boats crisis, people coming across the channel in dinghies, claiming asylum and then being put up at great expense in hotels. That's something that really bothers a lot of voters. So it's something that he has to show he is improving the management of, even if he can't actually stop that happening completely.
No, I'm glad you mentioned the immigration angle too, Tim. I think that's something that's often sort of overlooked given just the political turmoil that we've seen previous prime ministers having to overcome. Overall, though, how do you think that he can avoid being undermined by members of his own party?
That is going to be difficult. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of backbiting, a lot of briefing, which has resulted in the coup, effectively, against Keir Starmer, albeit a democratic one within the Labour Party. I think actually in terms of the way that Labour MPs behave, that really depends on whether Andy Burnham can sell a story to the electorate. One of the reasons that there has been so many internal problems in the Labour Party is simply because the Labour government has been so unpopular. If he can turn that around, if he can clearly get a lead over Reform UK, this populist radical right party that lasts more than a few months, if the economy seems to be heading in the right direction, if we get improvements in the NHS, and if he does show some sign of being able to get a grip on the small boats crisis, then I think his MPs will come in behind him. It is going to be difficult for him, but I think, to be honest, the way he handles his party is dependent on whether he can successfully impress the electorate. And he hasn't got much time to do that. I mean, traditionally, you don't get really a second chance to make a first impression. So everything he does in this first week is going to be absolutely crucial.
How do you think he'll handle U.S. President Donald Trump? It's safe to say that the man who he replaces had a complicated relationship with the U.S. president, and that's certainly an understatement. So how do you think this next prime minister will be able to deal with Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, I think it will be more of the same, to be honest. It will just be an attempt to calm and charm the president in as much as that's possible. I don't think we're going to see what some people refer to here as a Love Actually moment. We're not going to see Andy Burnham come out and say something very controversial about the president. He's going to continue, really, the Keir Starmer's effort to conciliate as much as possible, without, in the view of the British electorate anyway, humiliating himself. And that is a difficult trick to pull off.
Andy Burnham certainly setting expectations high, and the clock will be ticking for him as we wait for developments out of London. Thank you so much for joining me, Tim Bale, as always. Appreciate your perspective. All right, so there has been at least one constant at 10 Downing Street to help ease the transitions of power there. You heard us talk about him just a little while ago. Meet Larry the Cat, also known by his official title of Chief Mouser to the Cabinet Office. He's now preparing to serve under this 7th Prime Minister. Larry, a celebrity in his own right, and has lived at the political headquarters since 2011. We will certainly have to wait, though, to see how he welcomes his new team. And with the U.S. midterm elections getting closer, President Trump's approval ratings, they remain at or near all-time lows. In fact, his net approval rating, it is now lower than any other 21st century president. CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, breaking down the numbers for you.
A lot has been happening both domestically and internationally over the past few months. Obviously, last month we had a good inflation report for the month of June, but is any of this moving President Trump's approval ratings at all? And the short answer is not really, no. President Trump remains at or near record lows when we look at two polls that have come out over the past few days, both the Washington Post poll and the CNBC poll. What are we talking about here? Well, why don't we just take a look really simply at this? Okay, Trump's net approval rating. In April, according to Washington Post, he was 25 points underwater. That is approval minus disapproval. Now, basically the exact same spot. He's 24 points underwater, according to the Washington Post. That's his second worst net approval rating all time in any Washington Post poll. Now, you look at the CNBC numbers, and they tell the exact same story, even if they're slightly different numbers. In April, look at that. Trump was 18 points below water. Look at where he is now. Trump is 19 points below water. That is the worst ever net approval rating Donald Trump has ever had in CNBC polling. And when you combine the two of them, we can just say that Trump is underwater. You know what? I'll use one of my favorite phrases, like the Little Mermaid. Now, I want to put these numbers into some historical perspective for you, not just within Trump, but other presidents as well this century. And we're going to average the Washington Post and the CNBC poll, and why don't we do it right here? Okay, net approval rating for 21st century presidents in term 2, at this point in term 2, and we're going to take the CNBC and Washington Post poll and average them. Where do we see Trump at? Well, he's 22 points below water. Where was Barack Obama at this point in term number 2? He was only 8 points below water. How about George W. Bush? We were in the middle of the Iraq War at this point. That Iraq War, of course, would help lead to Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate back in 2006. Bush was 20 points below water. So what we can conclude here is, at least according to a CNBC Washington Post poll average, President Trump is in the worst position of any 21st century president at this point in term number 2. Now, what is driving these low numbers for President Trump? Well, simply put, it is independents. Independents are the name of the game. You win the center of the electorate, you usually win the elections. And these are why these numbers are so troubling for President Trump and for Republicans. Take a look here. Worst net approval ratings ever with independents at this point in term 2. Look who is worst on the list. Who ranks number 1 on the list you definitely don't want to be ranking number 1 on, and that is President Trump. 45 points underwater, according to the Washington Post poll. Look at that. That is worse. That is worse than Richard Milhous Nixon. At this point, just before he was forced to leave office because of Watergate, he was 37 points below water. And the aforementioned George W. Bush in the middle of the Iraq War, he was 31 points underwater. When you put it all together, this is quite the troubling set of numbers for President Trump. Despite the improving inflation rate, at least in June, it really didn't do much to help President Trump. He's still at historic lows, especially among independents. And of course, with the rising gas prices, I'm not expecting these numbers to get any better anytime soon.
Our thanks to Harry Enton for that. Well, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee says that he won't support Donald Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence. Senator Mark Warner says he's not happy with what he heard from Jay Clayton when the nominee appeared before his committee.
I've known Jay for a long time. I like him. But after his performance before my committee, his inability to answer the question about who won the 2020 election, or commenting on Gabbard's, the previous DNI's effort to interfere in the Fulton County elections, I am not going to vote for him.
You'll recognize Warner as a vocal critic of the acting director, Bill Pulte. He says choosing between Pulte and Clayton is like being caught between a rock and a hard place. Warner did say that he thinks Clayton will ultimately be confirmed. Well, the brothers Andrew and Tristan Tate, they are expected to appear in a Miami federal court on Monday following their arrests by U.S. Marshals. The social media influencers are facing extradition to the United Kingdom, where they face rape and sex trafficking charges. Just the latest accusation against the two. Here's CNN's Rafael Romo with more.
The arrests of both Tate brothers stem from a case focusing on alleged sexual abuse of women in the East of England region, just north of London, between 2010 and 2017. U.S. Marshals arrested both brothers in Miami on Saturday on an extradition request from the United Kingdom. Andrew Tate, seen here on the left, is a 39-year-old U.S.-born professional fighter turned media personality, known for his rants about male dominance, female submission, and wealth, a controversial personality that has earned him billions of views online. He was initially arrested in Bucharest in December 2022 together with his younger brother Tristan Tate, and Romanian prosecutors have accused them of trafficking and exploiting women. The brothers have repeatedly rejected the allegations made against them in that case, and they were allowed to leave Romania after authorities in the Eastern European country lifted travel restrictions on them arriving in Florida in February 2025. Authorities say the brothers, who have dual American and British citizenship, face dozens of new charges added onto previous charges brought by the Crown Prosecution Service after evidence was submitted by Bedfordshire Police. According to the UK Crown Prosecution Service and Bedfordshire Police, Andrew Tate, a self-proclaimed misogynist, faces 42 charges, including rape, human trafficking, indecent images of a child, and assault. According to the same officials, his brother Tristan Tate faces 17 charges, including sexual assault, rape, and trafficking. In a statement, Malcolm McHaffey, head of the Special Crime Division at the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, said the following: "We have decided to prosecute Andrew and Tristan Tate for further offenses, including rape, arranging or facilitating trafficking for sexual exploitation, and offenses relating to indecent images of a child. These charging decisions followed receipt of a further file of evidence from Bedfordshire Police and bring the total number of alleged victims in this case to 7. An attorney for the brothers said they are innocent and criticized the UK's move to seek extradition. There is a long-standing agreement between the UK and Romanian governments that the UK would not seek extradition while the Romanian proceedings are pending, attorney Joseph McBride said. Those proceedings are ongoing right now. That agreement exists because no nation gets to trample the judicial sovereignty of another for political convenience. In addition to these new charges and the case pending in Romania, Andrew Tate is also facing a civil suit in the UK, which is being brought by 4 women who accused the social media influencer of rape. A spokesperson for Tate previously told CNN that their client categorically denies what he called unproven and untested allegations. Rafael Romo, CNN, Atlanta.
Well, gas prices, they are still rising in the United States. After the break, we'll have a breakdown on the latest costs and also what could be behind this increase of prices at the pump.